All right, welcome back, everybody, to another week of the Kansas State podcast. We've had a lot of fun this season, talking Wildcats football and basketball with some other people from the Star. We've had Sam Ellinger on. Last week we had Vahe Gregorian stop by. But this week we're back to our bread and butter. We got Blair Kerkhoff talking with me. And what better guest this week? Is he is a true reporter to go out of his way to cover the Sunflower Showdown this weekend, and it was not exactly a battle of ranked teams. Probably about as far away from that as you could get. So Blair, why don't you start us off with that? What did you think of one of the most epic rivalry games ever played last week?
Yeah, epic I think is the absolute right term for it. It reminded me a little bit of the first Sunflower Showdown games that I covered, which were back in the late 80s and early 90s. It was after Bill Snyder and Glenn Mason got to their schools, but they hadn't really turned the corner yet on their success, and the game was pretty abysmal. And I thought this one was too. It just wasn't well played at all, but it was entertaining, and it was back and forth, which is not something you see in a Kansas State football game that often. It had you wondering, into the fourth quarter who was going to win the game. And again, that's just not something that you're used to seeing from when these two teams get together in football. It's the most, it's got to be the most lopsided rival of state schools that exists in the country. So from that standpoint, at least there was some mystery to it, but not well played, and not nothing that either side had a lot to be proud of in terms of just the artisticness of the game. But good for Kansas State to get the W. I think I've always thought this, that the game means a lot to both schools, but it really means a lot to Kansas State to keep the dominance, to continue the dominance over Kansas. And they got to do that on Saturday.
Yeah, I saw some people sum it up really good that the biggest and perhaps only positive Kansas State took away from the game is that they won, and I think that's well said. There wasn't really much else to take away from it from the Kansas State perspective. I honestly thought Kansas looked like the better team and really kind of frittered it away with holding penalties and a drop touchdown pass. They just seemed to move the ball so much better, and the way K-State's offense is playing, I bet if they played again, you'd probably be tied 1-1, and we'd be going to a rubber game to see who gets the series. But it's interesting times right now. Kansas is looking at a new coach. Kansas State might be in the same position in a few weeks. So kind of, the gap has been closed in the rivalry, and there's a lot of uncertainty moving forward. I guess where do you think it'll go in future years? Do you think we'll continue seeing dominance, or is this a time where maybe the tables get turned a little bit?
Well, it's funny when you mentioned the gap being closed, and it has closed, and it's not because Kansas has gotten significantly better. Kansas State has come back to the middle or lower part of the Big 12 pack, where the lower end is where Kansas has been for a decade now. So that doesn't bode well for K-State, and so it's to me it's interesting if we were watching the game and I was thinking about what to write about and how to think about the rivalry going forward. I think it's fair to ask where these programs are headed and in what direction. Whose future do you feel more confident in right now? I mean, certainly Kansas State has all kinds of advantages over Kansas. The facilities are great. There's a recent history and trend of success. And heck, 8 straight years of bowl games for the Wildcats, and they're still eligible to go to a bowl this year. They haven't been eliminated from that possibility. Meanwhile, Kansas has been last every year in the Big 12, or tied for last since in that decade. And yet, Kansas is. We know they're going to make a move. They've already fired David Beatty, who continues to coach out the season, and athletic director Jeff Long is flying all over the place looking for its new football coach. Meanwhile, Kansas State is kind of in a little bit of a limbo with its coaching situation. Is Bill Snyder still there? Is something going to change after the season? If not, can Kansas State recruit? Can they keep the players in the program happy? Can they recruit to the future? I think those are legit questions going forward when you're talking about Kansas State. So I think it's been a long time for me to come around to this thinking, but I do think we're going to see change after this season at the coaching position at Kansas State. I think I was holding out longer than most people who considered that possibility. I guess I've been around long enough to understand just how much Bill Snyder means to Kansas State and what he's meant to, not just the football program but the university. But the more you see of what's happening this season, the more I think you're led to believe that change is in the future for K-State. And if that's the case, if there is change, and of course change at KU, then I do think it brings those two programs a little more on a parallel track than Kansas State being the more dominant program, the team that you always see win this game by multiple touchdowns, at least for a little while. It depends. It's going to end up depending on who ends up at KU and whether Kansas State makes a change or not.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to watch. Because right now I would say, even though KU is starting from a lower position, I would say their arrow is trending up right now, where Kansas State is probably trending down, or at best just kind of standing still. So the next couple of years will be fascinating in that regard. As far as Kansas State goes, looking ahead, they got Texas Tech this week. I'm a little surprised. The line is only 6.5 points in favor of Texas Tech this week. I think the Red Raiders just have too much offense. I don't see the way Kansas State has played lately that they really have all that much hope in this game. But you never know. They're at home. The defense plays better in Manhattan, so maybe. From what you saw, what kind of chance do you give them against the Red Raiders?
Well, this is one of those matchups that I always think Kansas State has a decided edge in coaching, and that's not to disparage Cliff Kingsbury. I think Cliff's he's done a nice job this year. He's probably saved his job. It looks they're in. They're having a good season, but it's just kind of like the master against the pupil in this game, or historically it has been. And so, in addition to the home field, there's the edge of coaching as well. I don't know about the quarterback situation. Maybe you can clarify that for me a little bit at Texas Tech. Who's going to play quarterback? Or there's just a little. Sometimes it doesn't matter there because the systematic offense that they run, but I'm not sure exactly what's going on at quarterback at Tech. And historically, it seems like Tech is kind of they've had a recent history of starting out pretty strong and not finishing strong. And Kansas State's been the opposite. They've had some trouble early and had a finishing kick. So you may be surprised at the line, but I don't know. I think you'd hear some odds makers say that it should be a little closer than it is. And I understand why it is what it is, but I don't know. I've seen too much of this series where I think I thought that Tech had the better personnel, but Kansas State came away with the victory.
Well, you're right there. Cliff Kingsbury's only beaten Bill Snyder one time, and that was in Lubbock. It's never happened here. There is a little bit of uncertainty at quarterback. It doesn't look like Alan Bowman's going to play, but their backup, Jet Duffy, I believe is his name. I hope I pronounced it right. Led up Texas last week. He didn't really have too many problems on offense. So we'll see. I mean, like you said, maybe Snyder can work his magic over Kingsbury one more time. Just watching K-State struggle as much as they have on offense lately, I have my doubts. This game is going to have to be played, low 20s at best. That's probably as many points as K-State is going to score unless Texas Tech just gives them something with a pick six or something like that. Personally, I think if Texas Tech can get to 30, the game's over.
Yeah, you may be right. Yeah, you're right. I think you're right about that. But K-State still has the bowl carrot in front of them too. So
that's right.
There's something to play for. And if Kansas State finds a way to win on Saturday, I mean, I think they'll be even a bigger underdog at Iowa State the next week. But you give Kansas State a week to get ready for an opponent that's not Oklahoma, with the opportunity to be bowl eligible. Who knows what could happen there? But I remember when the schedule came out before the season, I saw that the year was ending with KU, Texas Tech, Iowa State. I just saw all those as victory opportunities for the Wildcats. I just thought that the Big 12 part of the schedule was front loaded for them, and they find their, they get their record built on the back end. But Iowa State, both Iowa State and Tech are playing better than I thought, especially the Cyclones. So it may not, it's not working out the way maybe we saw in the preseason. But you just, I don't know, just can't count out the Cats with bowl hopes. But I think that was one of the. I know that the Kansas people talked about that last week, and maybe that was on their mind that both teams going into last week's game still were bowl eligible. Nobody had been eliminated from that. And Kansas played probably, I'm sure they felt like one of their better games to keep it as close as they did. And I heard in the post game some of the players talk about how they wanted a chance for another week of thinking they could get to a bowl game. So that can be a motivation for a team.
That's right. And traditionally, nobody fights to get to 66 more than Kansas State. So you got to give them that.
Hey, it's Blair Kerkhoff, and if you're listening to this, you love Kansas City sports, whether it's the Chiefs, Royals, Sporting, Mizzou, KU, or K-State. And no one covers these teams like the Kansas City Star. If you currently subscribe to the paper or have a digital subscription, thank you for your support. And if you don't, here's a great offer. It's called Sports Pass, unlimited digital access to every sports story and video on kansascity.com. And it's just $30 for the first year. It's the best sports value in town, just 8 cents a day or $2.50 a month. You can't beat that. Subscribe now at kansascity.com/sportspass.
But before we let you go over here, Blair, we should probably talk some Kansas State basketball. The number 12 team isn't off to the best start of all time. Beat Kennesaw State ugly. Had some trouble with Denver before winning. They're only shooting 17.5% from three this year. Are you concerned at all? I mean, I know you haven't been here watching up close, but from afar, what do you think? Is there a reason to worry that they're not going to tear it up?
Well, I think if you're going to be off to a slow, if you're going to play poorly, this is the time to do it. And get readjusted, reacclimated to each other. I did get to watch most of the Denver game, and I was alarmed by the shooting. This was not what I saw in March last year, and I know they've had a couple little injury things to deal with, but Kennesaw State I don't know anything about, but I know Denver is supposed to. They think they have a pretty good team this year, so there was that. I'm not worried. These are the games where it may be difficult for teams to, when you're a team that went to the Elite Eight and beat Kentucky and had the kind of finish that Kansas State did, and now you're opening the season against some programs that you haven't heard much about. The players certainly not familiar with. They're not playing teams that have players that they would have either played against or played with, and sometimes in their lives. It can be a difficult situation. You'd want to see them take care of business the way a top 10 program would, but it hasn't happened. And I think you got another one of these. Well, the tournament's coming up, I think, for the Wildcats now, right? They
right.
Little bit different atmosphere and different opponents. So I bet they play better in the Virgin Islands. I believe that they'll play better there than we saw them play in the first two games.
I agree. The most alarming thing I've seen is just that their backcourt, Kamau Stokes, Cartier Jada, and Mike McGurl, all three have played poorly in their first three games. And for all three to play bad at the same time, I didn't see that coming. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not hitting the panic button yet. I don't think fans should either. I think they will pick it up in the Virgin Islands, but I do think that second game they play against either Pennsylvania or Northern Iowa could be tricky. if they don't shoot the ball, if they shoot the ball as poorly as they have, they could go down in that game. But I think if they get past that second game, they win the whole thing.
Both really well coached teams, by the way, Penn and UNI, and let's acknowledge this: at least these games have been close and low scoring. But Kansas State has played pretty good defense.
Oh yeah, great defense.
It's on the offense end that we've seen the problems, and we've seen problems from players who we've seen play better. So I just think that I think it'll all be okay, and I'm really looking forward to when the schedule's going to start this weekend, but the schedule gets a little tougher, and then continues on with they get a game with Marquette, I believe, coming up pretty soon, and this is a team that I'm looking forward to playing in some high-profile games in the non-conference.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Okay, Blair, well, we'll let you off the hook with that one. Thanks so much for stopping by. We'll talk to you again down the road.
Thanks, Kellis.